And I have a bit of a cough, so
No problem. Just try to
muffle
be
it.
away from them. I want to welcome everyone to the Learning Clinic on CKOU 96.7 FM. I'm your host, Bob Kerwin, and with me in the studio this afternoon is actually a former student of mine, Tracy Pepper, former student from St. Anne's, goes back just a couple of years, but we're really glad to have Tracy in the studio today because she's here on a mission. Tracy, before we get into talking about your background and getting into, Tracy's story, tell us a little bit about why you've come back to Sudbury and where you've come from and what you're actually doing in town right now.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I actually live in New Zealand now.
New
I've
Zealand.
been living there for 10 years.
Okay.
And last year I went to Africa and I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with a charity. And that really changed my life, and I didn't expect it to. I mean, my life had already been on a very different path, but
To be sure, yes.
But being in Africa made me realize that there's just so much more that needs to be done in the world.
Now, what brought you to New Zealand?
I had been given advice by a doctor to tell me to live my life to the fullest. And so I'd already traveled quite extensively around the world, and at that time I was 29 and my friends were all having families and buying houses and looking at real estate, and it didn't feel like that was really my path. So rather than invest in real estate, I decided to travel around the world and to go down to that part of the world. And when I got to New Zealand, something just told me that that was where I belonged.
Now, if we backtrack a little bit, you weren't just taking time off and a pleasure trip. I mean, you faced some pretty serious challenge throughout your life, didn't you?
Yeah. I used to say that the second half of my life was going to be amazing because the first half of my life was pretty challenging. And so when I was 10 years old, I was diagnosed with a very rare type of ovarian cancer, and I wasn't expected to survive. And my body was donated to help a clinical trial to trial drugs that hadn't been tested on a human before, but they didn't expect me to survive the trial. But I did. And so life has been, a series of challenges, and I'm always up to meet the challenge and to prove people wrong.
Now, you have a poster that's got a saying on it. I don't want to, brutalize the saying, but that saying about you're hoping that, basically, you hope that somebody looks at you and says,
because of you, I didn't give up.
right.
Yeah.
And I think when you take a look at the story, and I've been following this for, well, a little while since we got on Facebook and we actually connected on Facebook, and I've been following the story, and it's one of those things that if a person is facing adversity and facing challenges, listening to the story of what you went through and this journey of yours, yeah, I think that would be inspiring. So despite the fact that your life has kind of taken a lot of dips and turns and what have you, and yeah, your body was donated to a trial, you seem to be making quite a difference. And this whole tour now that you're going through in Canada has got a couple of purposes behind it, isn't there?
Yeah, of course. I mean, my purpose, one of the main reasons why I'm doing it is to collect unwanted winter clothing. And when I was in Africa climbing Kilimanjaro, I saw a need. There was the porters that were climbing the mountain helping us Western people had so little to wear, and it gets up to minus 22 degrees on that mountain. And people succumb to not just altitude sickness, but also exposure. And I had gone to Africa with a couple of extra winter jackets, and anytime I travel, I think ahead. I'm a very conscious traveler, and I think about the people and the culture that I'm going to be going into. And so I'm always one step ahead, thinking, what can I do and what can I bring, rather than just giving away money, because to me, I travel on a budget, and so I don't have a lot of extra money, but I have a lot of, we all have stuff. Our Western world is full of stuff, and
Yeah.
I hate waste. And I would much rather give stuff to someone who needs it than just throw it away or toss it in the Goodwill basket. So I brought a couple of extra winter jackets with me, and my warm clothing, which I wouldn't need after the climb, and I gave it away. And I made a couple of porters really cry because they were so overwhelmed with the generosity. And that's when I thought, gosh, this is just such a simple thing to do. If everybody who climbed Kilimanjaro brought an extra jacket, there wouldn't be such a problem in Africa. But people don't necessarily think consciously before they go, or maybe they just think their garbage isn't good enough for anyone else, or yeah. So when I thought about it, and I thought, well, who has the most unwanted winter jackets in the world? And I thought, well, my Canadian friends have a lot, and I was coming to Canada anyway to see my family. And so I thought, well, I will just drive across the country and catch up with friends who have traveled around and live scattered across the country, and we'll see what we can collect. I don't like to waste my time, so I'm trying to do everything purposefully.
Wow, and you're also promoting a book that you've written a chapter.
Yes, well, so when I was planning the climb to Kilimanjaro, somehow somebody found me from Estonia in Europe, and they got in touch with me and said that they were publishing this book, and it was about to be published in September of 2013. And they contacted me in August of 2013 and said, we want your story in our book. And I was flattered, and I said, but I haven't even climbed the mountain yet. And they said, we don't care, we really love your story, we think that it has a really significant purpose for our book, and it's unique and it's different and it's really heartfelt. So I had to write this story and get it to their editor and have it edited and then sent back. And when the book was published, it was right around the time that I was actually climbing the mountain. And I think that participating in that book was one of the many factors that made me get to the top, because when I say I'm going to do something, I do it.
Anything unusual about the climb? Because that sounds like it's actually a dangerous climb, isn't it?
It can be, yeah. It's like I said earlier. It's either the altitude. Most people get caught and have to come down with altitude, because the altitude sickness will either cause pulmonary edema, which affects your lungs and you start to cough up liquid or blood, and it's fatal, or you get cerebral edema, so you get fluid in the brain, and that also will cause death if you're not evacuated immediately. And one of the major causes of that is actually climbing the mountain too quickly. So you're better off, there's a saying in Africa, pole pole, slowly, slowly, and they stress the fact that you have to take your time and just enjoy the mountain. It's not a race, although some people do. There are incredible people out there who climb that mountain in a day and come back down. I don't know how they do that, but for the most part, yeah, the what gets you is the altitude. And then of course you have to have the right equipment as well.
So let's, you've done the chapter in the book, you've done the climb. What's next?
I don't know. I just take life as it comes. I live in the moment. So
Yeah.
I don't set big goals for myself. I don't have a 10-year plan. 10 years ago when I moved to New Zealand, I was told that I probably wouldn't live till 50. I disagree, and I think that changing my lifestyle has definitely added years to my life. I think living in a stressful environment really isn't good for any of us. And, you know, life can end for any of us at any moment. You hear of perfectly healthy people who just, you know, have a heart attack, and that's it at the age of, you know, 32 or 39 or, you know, 49 or, so I just don't take life for granted at all. And I'm making sure that I am getting the most out of my life because I want to be completely used up when I go, and I don't want to have any regrets.
So what are you doing in New Zealand
Hmm.
besides climbing mountains?
Well, I moved there, and I'm a registered massage therapist,
Right.
and I've been doing that for 20 years. So I had a business in Canada, and so I opened up a clinic, and I run a well-being center. I teach yoga, meditation, breathing, and actually, when I was training for Kilimanjaro, the majority of my training was yoga and breathing, because you have to keep yourself very calm, and you have to be able to breathe to get through the altitude. So I teach that, and I guess some would consider me a life coach. I do a lot of life coaching with my clients, and but you know, that's what I do to pay my bills. But my real passion is in volunteer work. So I spend most of my time volunteering for charities, mainly in New Zealand. I volunteer with an organization that supports young people with cancer, living with cancer. And I'm always saying yes if they need me. So because I have my own business, I can work around my volunteer schedule. And traveling. Traveling is a big passion of mine because that's what fuels me and opens my eyes to help me appreciate what I have.
So when we take a look at your, I guess your childhood, how did it affect your daily schooling, your the normal course that you know, 10-year-old would expect to follow going through school?
Oh, that's a good question. Like
how did it affect,
Yeah.
you might not even be able to know. I've got a 10-year-old
yeah, no.
granddaughter
Yep.
that I can't imagine facing this challenge.
Well, from my perspective, I didn't realize how sick I was. I so desperately when I got cancer, I mean, you know, I was the youngest of 5 kids, and this was back in the mid-1980s. Life was different, you know. We had a lot of freedom. I wasn't really, you know, my mom did the best that she could with us, but we really raised ourselves. She was very busy working. She was a single mom raising 5 kids. And so I was the peacemaker in the family. But I was also kind of just left, you know, to fend for myself. My bigger, older brothers and sisters were always home. So I was kind of just left to do my own thing. So when I got sick, it gave me a place in the family. Suddenly I had all this attention that I never had before. So I milked that. So going to the hospital, and I just got my mom all to myself, that to me was just the best. So I wasn't actually focusing on my illness. I wasn't milking the situation. I wasn't the victim. I was milking being the center of attention for the first time in my life. And so that actually forced me to do better in school. And because I didn't like anybody feeling sorry for me. I mean, it was evident that I was very sick. I didn't think I was as sick as I was because nobody told me how sick I was.
Could people tell?
Oh, of
How
course,
sick
yeah.
you were?
'Cause, yeah, I was bald, and I was pale, and it was obvious I had cancer. And you know, back then cancer was a death sentence, so it was just almost inevitable that I was going to die. So my friends kind of, you know, kept their distance because that was the coping mechanism. You know, we didn't talk about cancer back then. It was too awkward. People didn't know what to say. So for that reason, I was even more desperate to be normal.
Right.
So I worked really hard. I didn't want to miss school. You know, I didn't want to. I had all sorts of reasons why I could have not gone to school, and I didn't have to do gym class, but I really wanted to. And I think it's that determination that helped me beat cancer because I was just so determined.
And for all intents and purposes, have you beaten it?
Yeah. I mean, the ovarian cancer side of things when I was 10, I had a 5-year relapse, and then after that I was considered cured. However, it was more actually the biggest worry was the long-term damage that the chemotherapy might have caused, because I was part of a clinical trial, they didn't know what the long-term damage would be.
You were so young, you're still.
Yeah,
young.
exactly, and the chemotherapy wasn't really geared for a little person, it was for an adult. So the long-term side effects were virtually unknown, but the short-term side effects were really severe. My mom had to make a call on that one, it was liver damage, kidney damage, heart damage, brain damage.
Is she gonna hate me when she gets older?
Exactly, and the
That
guilt.
that would be a big question for a parent.
Well, I just the guilt,
Mhm.
the guilt that she probably still deals with, did she make the right choice? Of course, what choice do you have? You have to just make a call, and luckily, I wasn't affected that severely, short term. And even long term, I think, look, I've been given an extra 30 years on my life. Well, I'm not a victim at all. I'm grateful.
So it's almost as if what you're living now is a bonus.
Exactly. So I could sit down and I could feel really sorry for myself because I can't have children. Or I can feel sorry for myself because I, have issues with my organs. But they're not,
They're not debilitating, right?
No.
They're not preventing you from doing things
no, but the
most
thing
people
is,
would dream about.
exactly, but the thing is, that's because I don't listen. I don't listen to my doctors who tell me, you're gonna be on medication for the rest of your life. You probably won't be able to do this. You probably won't be able to do that. You really need to be careful. Well, I'm pretty fearless. I don't live in fear, and I want, like I said earlier, I want to do everything that I possibly can in this life.
So if you were going to leave this earth, you'd rather do it on top of a mountain?
That's right. And that was the risk that I took climbing Kilimanjaro.
I can imagine.
Yeah. And to be completely honest, I was scared. I was worried about that. I thought, well, I talked to a few heart specialists, and I had just before I left for Africa, I had gone through and had an extensive one of those tests that they do where you're walking on the treadmill and
Oh,
you're hooked up to all the machines, and
I don't ever want to go through that.
it wasn't bad, but my specialist, she looked at she was monitoring my heart rate and my blood pressure, and she said, how do you feel? And I said, fine, and she said, okay, and she just kept me going, and afterwards she told me that my blood pressure was so high that if I was any other patient, she would have had me sit down and let my blood pressure come down. But because I wasn't affected by it at the time, we just, and I said, well, what do you think about me climbing Kilimanjaro? And she said, go for it. And I said, really? And she said, you're not normal.
Yeah. You shouldn't have survived the test.
Yeah. And she said, I could tell you not to do something, but she said, if you were gonna have a heart attack, you would have had one by now with the way that your heart works. But she confirmed to me what I intuitively know, that I just vibrate at a higher frequency. So because my heart pounds harder than the average person, that doesn't make me unhealthy at all. It's just the way that I'm made. And I refuse to spend the rest of my life on medications, and I don't recommend this to anybody. I'm not telling people to take their health into their own hands, but the medication was making me sick. And it was obvious that the medication was just making me sick, and my body developed a tolerance to it, and it would bring my blood pressure down, but I was gaining weight, I had no energy, I was just a shell of myself. And as soon as I would develop a tolerance to the medication, my blood pressure would go up again. So it was fighting against nature.
Mhm.
So I made a conscious decision to find a homeopathic doctor who believed me when I told her that I believe that my heart, my blood pressure, because I don't always have high blood pressure, it comes and it goes. And I think it's directly related to emotions. And especially if I am doing something that I feel very passionate about, my blood pressure naturally raises. So to me, actually, that's a good indicator that I'm doing something that is driving me. So why would I want to stop it?
And the results are,
I
Fine.
made it to the top of Kilimanjaro.
yeah, I mean, it sounds as if it's, things are turning out fine. What's the big difference between New Zealand and Canada?
Mhm.
It's curious.
Yeah,
It
it's-
sounds like a wonderful place to live.
It's amazing. It's not actually all that different to Canada. It's like a little mini Canada. So we've got, the landscape is very similar, but on a much smaller scale. But the biggest difference probably is the weather. You know, you can live, if New Zealand is comprised of two islands, so you've got the North Island and the South Island. The North Island is sort of subtropical, and the South Island has the mountains, and it's like Canada.
Which island had the,
Earthquake?
with the earthquake?
The South Island, which was a surprise because the big fault line runs through Wellington, which is in the North Island. So again, you know, nature versus nurture, really. You
Mhm.
know, you can't really guarantee where you're gonna live, and you can't live in fear, you just have to live where you want.
And New Zealand, just, it was your choice at the time?
Yeah, well, when I got there, it was like, you know, my whole life living in Canada, I never really actually ever felt like I belonged anywhere. It was hard for me to settle in one place. I grew up in Sudbury, and I still consider Sudbury my home, but I don't have any family left here. My grandfather passed away a few years back, and he was my last living relative in Sudbury. And my family are all in the Toronto area. I'm not really enamored by living in Toronto. It's too fast-paced, too high stress for me. So I moved a lot. Like every year I'd move, and I'd set up a new business, and I'd get myself established, and then something would prompt me to move to another town. And when I went to New Zealand, it was like suddenly, if I was a cell phone, I had full 4-5 bar coverage. It was like I'd been living my life in Canada on very limited connection. You know, I wasn't connected to anything here, but in New Zealand I just feel really connected. And I've learned I needed to separate myself from maybe my old conditioned life to really figure out who I really am, and not trying to be something that I think everybody else thinks I should be.
It's a profound philosophical approach to life, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess, but that's really when I switched on and tuned in to my purpose, and you know, I don't think that we are meant to stay in one place forever. I think that we get comfortable, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. Again, I think everybody has their own purpose, and some people are stayers, and some people, you need those people who, you know, settle down, have their families, they are, you know, definitely meant to be parents and to raise amazing people to contribute to a community. Unfortunately, and I envy those people actually, I wish that I could just come home and settle down, but I am a doer and I'm a dreamer, and my purpose is to spread myself around and to connect with people and to move on and to connect with more people and to move on and to connect with more people. And through doing that, I become more and more inspired.
So you must believe in destiny a lot.
Well, I think I do. Yes, I believe in I don't like the word destiny.
Like why you?
Purpose.
Why are you
Yes.
in your situation, somebody else is
Yes.
staying on? What was the change? What was it that put you in this role? And what is your purpose, and for how long are you going to be achieving that purpose? And why New Zealand? And what was it that made that happen? I think at some point when you talk about stress, people who kind of regret where they are in their place in life, they can get into this rut where they kind of feel sorry for all the things that have happened to them, whereas the people who kind of accept that, I have no idea why I am here today, but I am here today, and it's something is going to happen as a result of me being here today that's going to change the future. I don't know why or when or what. I'll just give you a very simple example. Probably 30 minutes before you had emailed me or texted me about whether I wanted to do the show. The person who was supposed to be on at 12 o'clock emailed me and said that she wasn't going to be able to be here because she wasn't feeling good.
Oh.
And so the time was booked until 30 minutes prior to you getting hold of me.
Right.
And you and I know we've been talking about getting together and meeting and whatever, and probably had we not met today, I would not have met you again, despite the fact that we've been in contact with each other for
Years.
through Facebook.
Interesting.
So when you take a look at, okay, why did all this happen? I don't question why it happened, and there's a reason why you're here and not the other person.
Yeah.
Now, what is going to come from that, or why that happens, who knows?
Who knows?
But it's there, and I think when you take a look at, there are people who have their own little world. I know for a fact that the world that my wife and I lived in changed totally the minute after our first grandchild was born.
Really?
And as we've been fortunate enough to be able to watch 3 of them grow and develop, because my oldest son has stayed in the Sudbury area. And we've told people that unfortunately when young people have to move away and grandparents are on a distance, it's a really different it's a different relationship. And I think the fact that the kids can drop in at a moment's notice, and when there's a quick call, can you look after the kids for a couple hours, it's like we drop everything. As parents, we never did. It was like we were too busy raising children to appreciate them. And we've often said, wouldn't it be so wonderful in this world if you could be a grandparent before you're a parent?
Yeah.
And
It's
you
funny,
were like,
I had this conversation yesterday with my best friend.
there you go.
Yeah.
And when you started your conversation today about the warning that the chances of you getting past 50 are slim, it's almost as if we all knew when the final bell was going to ring, how would it change the way we live?
And it shouldn't.
It shouldn't.
Because you can get hit by a bus tomorrow.
You can, but when you know that it's there, it kind of means that every day you spent another day, and that that savings account of days is going down. You're going to make sure that you're spending it well.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about living with purpose, I think a lot of people don't find their purpose, or they don't realize they've found their purpose until
Maybe
they get older.
they don't feel worthy of having a purpose. I think, look, I'm turning 40 in a couple of weeks, and I've only really come to terms and accepted my purpose probably within the last 2 years, because I still was determined to try to be normal. Even though I was living in New Zealand was a stepping stone to help me to get where I am now. And I've always been involved in charity work, and I've always done volunteering, but I was too, I didn't feel worthy enough to say, or maybe not the word worthy, but I didn't feel, I was too humble to say, you know, this is my purpose. I'm just doing what comes naturally. You know,